Today I've got a new way for you to use up your 6x6 pattern paper to make a handful of projects and have no scraps left over. Hey, it's Beth. Welcome. Today I have another new sketch set for you. This no scraps sketch set is number 22. It's for 6x6 paper. It uses 3 sheets of 6x6 and you'll get 2 bookmarks and 3 A2 size cards when you're done. So in the sketch set, I have cutting guides for the 6x6 pattern paper sheets, and then sketches for like instructions for the bookmark, and then sketches for the cards that you'll be making. I will have this linked in the description box below. It is free to access. You can download the PDF, keep it on your device, print it, whatever you would like. Today I am using paper from the Goin' Campin' 6x6 pad from Crafty Stamp Co. And I've picked out some patterns. So the bookmarks that we're making are going to be what's called corner bookmarks. So they actually slide on like the end of a page. So we'll be doing some folding. So I chose some of the smaller like detailed patterned papers that I had left, because you're going to be kind of having like small pieces showing when you're done with the bookmark. And so I didn't want like a large tree or anything that you wouldn't be able to like fully get the vibe of what the pattern is. So I went with the smallest patterns that I had left in the pad. And then it's nice that it is double-sided. You don't have to have double-sided paper. It is nice if it's double-sided for the bookmarks, so then you can see like pattern on like the outside and the inside, but it is not a requirement. And then these two are going to be cut with this first cutting guide here. And then this piece is going to be for this second cutting guide. Because of my sketch C, this is going to be the mat for the background. So you can see like on this pattern, it wouldn't work well for the size of the bookmarks that I'm going to be making, because you would just see like the top of a tree or the bottom of a tree. So we'll kind of walk through how to use the sketch and make our projects together. The first thing we need to do is cut down all of our patterned paper. So for this first cutting guide, we're going to cut 2 sheets of the 6x6. So I'm starting there at the 4-inch mark that goes all the way through, and then turning it and cutting out the 2-inch strip off of the 4-inch strip. And then for that right-hand strip, I'm just cutting off 1 inch at the bottom, and then I'm going to repeat, cutting at 4 inches, turning it, cutting off 2, and then from this strip we'll just cut off 1 inch at the bottom. So for the second cutting guide, we're only cutting 1 sheet. So again, cutting at the 4-inch mark, which cuts all the way through, and then we'll cut off that 3/4 inch strip at the bottom. And then from this next strip, we're just going to cut down 3 of the 2-inch squares. And again, you don't need to remember these measurements. They will all be in the PDF that is linked in the description box. So now I'm going to scoot all of these pieces out of the way. And we are going to start with our bookmarks. So in this little kind of template up here that I give you, there are letters that kind of mark the grid that we're going to be making. So basically we're folding it in half one way, and then we're going to turn it like 90 degrees either direction, and we're going to fold it in half again. So basically you're making a quadrant. You have 4 different squares now separated by your score marks. We're going to take one of these squares and cut one whole like little square off. So I'm trying to figure out, my paper is directional, so I'm trying to figure out which way I want my pattern to go so that it'll be right side up on the front. And then you're going to cut outside of your score marks. This will help it fold better in the end. You can use a trimmer for this. I just prefer, it's quicker for me to use scissors. And then we're going to go to the opposite square and cut off half of this at an angle. So you're basically cutting off a triangle portion. And again, you can use trimmer or scissors. So now we have this kind of funky L-shaped piece. And it doesn't really matter which side you fold over which. Sometimes it folds naturally one way better than the other, but basically you're taking the two full square size sides and folding them like one on top of the other. So now from that like L shape piece, we now have a square. And I'm just using a bone folder to burnish this down. My paper is pretty thick and slick. So now you can see it's a little pocket that will fit on top of a book page or a journal page. We're going to repeat this again. And if you want, you can totally use a scoreboard or a scoring tool to score this before you fold it. You would just need to score it at the 2-inch mark, going vertical and horizontal. And then you can fold it. So we have our scoring or our folding done, and I'm trying to show you that I'm cutting on the outside of the score mark. It's kind of hard to see, but again, cutting outside of your score mark just helps it fold better. So we've got that square. We're going to come to the opposite corner and cut off our triangle piece, and then we can fold it up and glue it. So like I said, these are great for bookmarks in books, or you can use them for embellishments in your journals. You can add, I'm not embellishing these today at all, but you could totally embellish them up more, adding, something to the front on that top triangle piece. And these are great for gifts, you could sell them at craft shows, but maybe bundle them up and sell some at a craft show. But here we're moving on to our first sketch, which is sketch B, and we're going to use those squares and triangle pieces that we cut off. So on the squares, because we cut outside of the score mark, I'm going to trim off those like scoring lines so that I now have like a more perfect square, straighter edged square. So we're just going to trim those up. And then we're going to pull in the rest of the pieces for our sketch B. We have the long 2-inch strip. We're going to go with the shorter 2-inch strip. And then we have the square and the triangle. And I'm just trying to figure out which kind of patterns I want to use with which. If you have single-sided paper, you don't really have a choice. You're just using, 2 different patterns. Because mine is double-sided, I was trying to decide which sides I wanted out, and then did I want to repeat the pattern from that long strip, or have with the square, or have a different pattern. But I do like how having a solid, kind of more solid pattern on that triangle piece helps to create a kind of outline for that square piece, a little bit of a drop shadow kind of border. And I'm not using any matting layers on these cards right now. I will show you some at the end, examples of how you can mat, the pieces, the pattern paper pieces that you cut. I don't give you any kind of cutting guide for cardstock matting layers. So if you do bring in some matting layers on your own from other cardstock, I can't guarantee you no scraps from that. I can only guarantee you no scraps from the pattern paper pieces that we cut down with the cutting guides. If you do have some of the cardstock pieces left over, you can use them for, you can punch shapes out of them, use them for embellishments. You can add, additional color to your card with some punch circles. You can add it to the inside of the card. You can use it behind some of the pieces to create some dimension. So there are ways to use up those scraps, but today our focus is on the pattern paper. Now, saying that, I did bring in some scrap cardstock to go behind my happy birthday sentiment because I felt like the sentiment got lost. So I'm showing you here. It's not bad. It's okay, but it just pops so much more with that little bit of red behind it. And since I don't have a whole lot of, since there's a lot of busyness on the card and I'm not really embellishing this card, I kind of wanted to make the sentiment stand out really well. So I am going to mat that on some scrap red cardstock that I just had laying around. in my little scrap bin. And then we had some extra pieces, some pieces labeled extra on the cutting guide. And I'm going to pull in one of those and just cut a little piece off, because I did want to, the white space at the top right was bothering me, and I felt like I could fill it. So I am going to add this little fishtail banner up at the top corner there. This is not part of the sketch. You don't have to do this. Like I said, I just felt like I needed it to kind of balance out the card a little bit. So that was the first card. For this sketch, for sketch B, we're actually making 2 cards. So I'm going to do the same thing, but with the other patterns that I had left. My sketch sets have sketches that are very basic, but that is because the focus is on using the patterned paper. So if you are a beginning card maker or a beginning paper crafter and you don't have a whole lot of supplies, you can still use these guides with a pad of 6x6 paper and not have a whole lot of extra supplies and still make a set of cards and the bookmarks, without any problem. If you are a more experienced crafter, you've been crafting for years, you have a huge stash of supplies, you are welcome to embellish these cards as much as you want. I keep them basic so that you can kind of decorate the card to your taste, to your needs. It can be as simple as you want or as elaborate as you want. So for this card, I now have all of my pattern paper pieces on there, and I'm again going to bring in a sentiment. And these are just stamped sentiments that were already in my stash. I don't even know what sets they're from. But first I am going to add another, I'm going to use the yellow pattern this time and add another little fishtail banner at the top because I really liked how that came out. You could also add like enamel dots or, some other type of shape or circle or banner at the top as well. So I have a thinner, kind of skinnier sentiment this time that I'm again going to back on some of that scrap red cardstock. And then even after I do this, I think it's because I used the red cardstock and it's on the red plaid, it goes across the red plaid pattern. It still stands out, but I just wanted to bring in a little, offsetting color on the card, I guess. So with the pieces that I had left in this pad, I also had some pre-stamped images, and so there was a little fire image that I just did some basic coloring on and then fussy cut it out, and I'm just going to add that like right above the sentiment. So it just kind of helps, I guess, highlight the sentiment a little bit more. So this will finish off our sketch B cards, and then we're going to move on to sketch C. So for sketch C, if you are using single-sided paper, I have a few suggestions. You can bring in some matting layers to go behind your little 2-inch squares, or you could bring in, instead of using the square we cut off from the bookmarks, you could bring in those to sketch C and then use 2 of the squares from, that we cut down for sketch C on the cards for sketch B, if that makes sense. That's if you're using single-sided paper and you want to kind of vary the patterns a little bit. Here on this one, since I have double-sided paper, I'm keeping this particular one simple, and I'm just going to add the tree pattern squares to the front of the card directly. Because it's a white background, I kind of felt that they popped enough and there was enough differentiation in color. And then for this one, I'm going to bring in another happy birthday sentiment that was already stamped from my stash. And we will add that to the bottom left. And you have some flexibility. You can change the shape of the sentiments. You can move the sentiment around on the card to where you think it looks best. In this particular case, it worked for me to go ahead and do it in the left-hand corner. I'm just going to overlap the square a little bit. I'm not going all the way, halfway across like the sketch shows. And then I am going to bring in a little star die cut that I did from some yellow scrap paper and add that onto the tree pattern just to bring in a little bit extra color. And then we have these 3 pieces left that were all labeled extra from the cutting guides. And so on the 2 smaller ones, I'm just going to add some fishtail banners to them, and we're going to add these to the insides of the cards. And I always like to do this. 1, it helps use up scraps, and 2, it just kind of makes the inside of the card a little more fun. It pulls the outside of the card in and then just, you know, adds a little pizzazz. So it's not all boring white or whatever color your card base might be. So I also made a set with some matting layers so you can kind of see the difference. So this was the first card we made together. And then here's an example of some matting layers. I did have to bring in a green plaid because I didn't have any more of that yellow pattern, but this one has a yellow mat with some white mats behind the patterns. And then on the second card we made together, I added just the card mat this time, and then I have some circles up here in the top right. And then on the third card we made, which did have a card mat already, I added a double mat with some craft cardstock behind it, and then I added some matting layers behind all of the squares, and then just brought in some additional embellishments. So you can see that you can kind of take these cards and, you know, make them whatever. You could add additional embellishments to all of these. You can make them as simple as you want or as elaborate as you want. It's all based on your style and the supplies you have on hand. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the sketch, got some inspiration on using up your 6x6 pattern paper. If you have any questions, leave them below in the comments. And again, check the description box for the free sketch set link that you can click to download. I thank you all so very much for your time and hope you all have a very crafty day.